Right, we're all gathered, just come this way. The entrance to this particular cave is quite low down, so... Right, if you just stay close behind me, mind the shale on this floor. Quite slippy. We are, of course, part of a much wider network of caves that riddle the entire county, including the much larger Red Scar cavern located some half a mile away to the west. A trifle flashy for my taste, I have to say, with their gift shop, granary-style cafeteria and 100% safety record plastered all over their promotional literature. But there you go. Now, if we stay in single file, we'll make our way into the main cavern. I do think it's worth pointing out that Red Scar were served with a council notice ordering them to replace 115 yards of faulty wiring. Put it this way, I wouldn't like to get caught down there in a thunderstorm, and no amount of trilobites in perspex or stegosaurus-shaped pencil tops is going to change that. This particular cavern may already be familiar to you from its countless appearances on the small screen. In 1974, you couldn't move down here for Cybermen. In fact, there was a rather amusing incident in which Tom Baker sprained his ankle on that rock there. This goes to show how easily accidents happen.
Scanning for audio.
Welcome once again to a Tin Dog podcast. I've already recorded this once using my other mic setup, but because of a dodgy connection, the first 5 minutes are basically crackly as hell. So I've gone back to record the first 5 minutes again. Basically, in this first 5 minutes, I say that I'm going to talk about Revenge of the Cybermen. I also talk about writing for and illustrating for the terrible Zodin fanzine, which is now available, issue 7, where I review one of the episodes from the new Smith season. It's an extremely good fanzine, and one that I really suggest you track down. I'll try and put a link on the Tin Dog webpage. I also say that at the moment I'm a little bit strapped for cash, and I'll be selling some of my most prized possessions on eBay. If you'd like to have a look at some Clone Wars maquettes, that's the limited edition numbered ones, or some signed Buffy memorabilia, or indeed basically just some cool stuff, just click on the Whostrology link on the main Tin Dog page, and that'll redirect you to things that are for sale from me. Remember, of course, Whostrologies are still available. In saying that, if you've bought a Whostrology from me and haven't heard it read out on a Tin Dog podcast, could you please drop me an email at the usual address? Right, enough about that. Let's see if I can try and remember what I said at the beginning of my review of Revenge of the Cybermen.
Where we've parted company with the TARDIS.
He's dead.
Once the infection develops, they've got a few minutes to live.
I don't believe you've got the plague here, Commander. Sabotage.
Doctor, she's not going to last much longer.
I know, Harry, I know.
Boga, of course.
Planet of Gold. Cybermen. That's what we're up against.
We are destined to be rulers of all the cosmos.
You tried that once and you were nearly wiped out.
Because of Boga and its gold.
That beacon has to be blasted out of the sky.
Boga will be destroyed.
Basically, Revenge of the Cybermen is a pretty good story. It was the first one ever to be released on video back in the 80s, but more about that later on in the podcast. Revenge of the Cybermen is an interesting tale. The Cybermen hadn't been seen since the Troughton era. John Pertwee never really got to meet them until the Five Doctors, and even then that hardly counts. It is, of course, more or less at this point in my original recording that I started talking about a couple of the extras on the DVD, especially the one where Tom Baker's interviewed, and you get to see a very different side of Tom, because he'd only been in the role 5 minutes. Here's the rest of the surviving review.
Hello, this is Nick Briggs, and you're listening to Tin Dog Podcast.
And this is no exception. It uses the sets left over from the Ark in Space story, and indeed is part of the larger narrative, but of course takes place at a much earlier point in history. Having escaped Skaro using the Time Ring and not the TARDIS, they arrive back in, well, the same location, a much cheaper option using the same location and sets, i.e. this enormous space station. Now, unlike the Ark in Space DVD, there isn't a CGI option for the effects, which surprised me, because the Ark in Space computerized space station actually looked quite good. But I suppose doing the initial crossfade from an opening scene might have proved a little bit difficult or time-consuming, or indeed in these days, costly. So our heroes, all three of them, that would be the Doctor, a male and female companion, something we won't see for a few more years again, when Turlo and Tegan rule the roost, and then again not until, well, these days, of Mr. and Mrs. Pond. The Harry relationship is glorious to behold. A massively underestimated gentleman of a character. He's a proper Doctor, the acting's impeccable, and something that could so easily have been a caricature becomes something, well, lovable and loved. The story itself consists of, well, aspects taken from earlier stories. Think Matt Smith's Victory of the Daleks, and the way that it was influenced by earlier Doctor Who stories. Well, that is how Revenge of the Cybermen works. Aspects of earlier Cybermen stories, and of course the earlier Ark in Space, have all been brought together to produce something that's, well, just another Doctor Who story. Reasonably run-of-the-mill, but still very close to a lot of fans' hearts for reasons I'll go into in a moment. Narrative-wise, a large asteroid called Voga has turned up in our solar system. The station is being used as a beacon to warn people off, and everyone on board the beacon seems to be dying mysteriously of some sort of space plague. Again, the sort of thing that you saw in the Moon Base, a previous Cyberman story. Of course, this isn't an uninhabited asteroid. This is Voga, planet of gold, where people with enormous foreheads doing impersonations of British Prime Ministers dwell and hide from the universe, because they've got more gold than you can shake a stick at. In fact, that appears to be the only thing they have on this world. They don't seem to have, well, anything to eat or anything to trade except for gold, which is odd. Of course, whenever you have gold, you have human greed, and here we have someone who, well, is practically a Nazi trying to get some more gold, playing both sides off, because the gold was very important during the last cyber war. Yes, something called a glitter gun, and let's not go there, was used to fire gold dust at Cybermen. This is the beginning of the end of the whole Cybermen really don't like gold. And they don't like gold, because it clogs up their chest units. And if it clogs them up, they all end up being, well, you know, ill. As a sideline, I just want to say that one of the Cybermen variants, in Mike Tucker's Illegal Aliens, gets gold thrown at him. It goes into his chest unit, gets filtered out, and comes out the bottom. It's a lovely little moment, proving that Cybermen aren't always allergic to gold, or indeed nail varnish remover, but that's another story. So the Cybermen, not many of them left these days, all have a go at this planet. They decide to blow it up from the inside, using, as always, a ridiculously complex series of plans. Now, the original story for this was created by Kit Pedler, one of the original Cybermen creators. But the script itself was taken away, locked up, rewritten, and then handed back to the world. This story is perhaps most famous for the very first use of that great Cyberman catchphrase, "Excellent." Something that would become an echo all the way through all the following Cybermen stories, especially in the 80s, although not so much these days. Think about the title, if you will, for a moment. Revenge of the Cybermen. The Cybermen are cold, logical creatures. Would cold, logical creatures truly want revenge? Now, I know that it's the Vogans who say that the Cybermen want revenge, so I suppose that's the sort of thing they do. And also their voices are very odd in this. They sound almost, well, foreign. But perhaps that was the vogue at the time for aliens. Yes, there's lots of fun with Cybermats, again redesigned for the 70s, mainly because the original props had fallen apart. The Cybermen here have flares and have a brand new head design. This is either Design 4 or Design 3, I'm not completely sure, I think it's 4 in the Cyberman history. Yes, they change more often than the Teletubbies stroke Daleks, but that's acceptable. After all, it's the Cybermen. The planet Voga itself, split into two. The first half being studio-bound and CSO-based, and the other half being a location filming in a place called Wookiee Hole. Not, as I said in the opening of this programme, Stump Hole Cavern. Wookiee Hole is located in the south of England, and I visited a couple of years ago. There's a big sign outside that says you can have your weddings inside Wookiee Hole, and if ever you do visit, pay close attention to this poster. At the very front, there's a man and a woman getting married, and they're all full of sweetness and light and love for each other. But look at the crowd behind them. Hundreds of people wearing anoraks, all looking cold and miserable and a little bit angry at the bride and groom, because they've brought them to this underground dwelling place. It's one of the funniest posters you'll ever see advertising something. I suggest you track it down. But yes, like they said, in the 70s you couldn't get moved down here for Cybermen. It's a great place to visit, actually. They have their own paper-making facility, and it's actually quite a nice day out for not a particularly large amount of cash. The plastic dinosaurs as well are well worth seeing. I didn't, however, see any Cybermen. Yes, it's a good story. Arguably the better of the two contained in the boxed set. And Tom isn't at his most eccentric. He's still almost playing the Doctor, as seen by Pertwee. You could imagine Pertwee delivering many of these lines. Yes, the Cybermen have been brought back as a stunt, because the Daleks were so successful the previous season and indeed in Genesis. But you can forgive them. It's his first season, and you've got to grab the audience. So bringing the Daleks out, as well as the Cybermen, is perfectly forgivable. And it's the sort of thing that would happen these days as well. It's a small story. It's a base under siege story, which of course Doctor Who does so well. What else do you get on this disc? Well, for me, the highlight has to be the documentary Checks, Lies and Videotape. For me, one of the greatest documentaries ever to appear on any Doctor Who DVD. It deals with something that most of the DVD documentaries just don't touch, which is fandom, specifically their links with early VHS. You see, Revenge of the Cybermen was actually the first available to own completely legally Doctor Who story. It cost £40 at the time, which was a lot of money even for now. And more importantly, fans really, really wanted this. This documentary doesn't just deal with the release of the first VHS, it deals with the time itself and interviews a lot of fans about the black market that existed in episodes that you just couldn't get. Stuff that was from Australia, stuff that was from around the world. It was a time of fandom not too long ago that would have created such interest. It really shows you how far we've come, especially with the internet and with DVDs and wall-to-wall repeats. We genuinely don't know how lucky we are these days. It's a lovely look into the past and something I'd recommend you getting just for this. That BBC opening. There's something wonderfully romantic about finally seeing the BBC Video promo logo appearing on your screen so many years later. Other things included on the disc are of course the making of the PDFs and a rather pleasant commentary that doesn't have Tom but does have Liz on it, and sadly can't have Harry. I believe I've rambled far too much about this story. In a moment there'll be a Whostrology and something rather nice from the Who Mix website. So remember, if you'd like to buy any Tin Dog Podcast related products, feel free to visit the website and click on one of the links. And as always, if you'd like your own Whostrology, feel free to visit. Oh, as a little sideline, if you have bought a Whostrology from me and you've never heard it read out, please drop me an email at the usual address and I'll make sure that it gets bumped up the list.
8 out of 10 listeners who expressed a preference say they prefer the Tin Dog Podcast.
We certainly do over here at Staggering Stories.
.net.
And now the Whostrology reading for Thomas Atter, or Tom Atter as he's known, over at the Doctor Who Podcast. Born on the 10th of July 1972. Born in the time of the Third Doctor, with the second and first due to arrive. Born between seasons 9 and 10, that's the Time Monster and the Three Doctors, and on the anniversary of the broadcast of the Time Meddler Part 2. Share your birthday with Jackie Lane. Your Whostrology. Some things in life have been a load of tom tit. Your vehicle will become your own very soon. Consider doing a job for your oldest friends in exchange for the return of your driving licence and attending your first family reunion. Owning a toaster is no guarantee that you will not be eating blackberries for breakfast. Your new watch will simply confuse matters when visitors arrive from the north. Today, solitude and stories are on your mind. So until next time, when I'll be talking about Silver Nemesis, be seeing you.
The Nemesis generates destruction. I launched it into space with an orbit that brings it back to Earth every 25 years.
What's really going on, Doctor?
Destroy them!
Destiny beckons.
I am beautiful, am I not?
That lot were only the advance party.
Eradicate the human female.
You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.
In 1974, you couldn't move down here for Cybermen. In fact, there was a rather amusing incident in which Tom Baker sprained his ankle on that rock there. Just goes to show how easily accidents happen. Yes, we've had all the celebrities down here, including the late Don Henderson of Bullman fame, the Chuckle Brothers, you may have noticed the autograph in the ticket booth, and Michael Burke and the 999 team. It's around about this stage of the tour I'd like to raise the subject of darkness. You know, there's nothing quite like the darkness we get down here in the caves. And to illustrate this, we do like to turn out all the lights just for a few moments. I myself, not fond of the darkness. I sleep with the lights on now. It's in the darkness I see the boy's face, eyes protruding, tongue out, black. If you look over here, you'll see some of the limestone formations, which Stumphole is more famous, used to be more famous. And over the years, the lads have given them a variety of comical names, depending on what they're meant to look like. So here we have Santa Claus, his beard and sack, the Wombles. You'll see how the sediment forms the brim of Orinoco's hat, the specimen jar, the toffee apple, and Errol Flynn. This one over here, people say to me, Mick, that doesn't look like anything at all, but I don't know. When I look at it, I seem to see a little pair of hands clutching at a slippery wet rope, sliding down into the dark water. Sometimes I'll stand here for hours, just looking at it. That concludes the main part of the tour, if you'd follow me. Michael Burke did say to me, Mick, you can't go on blaming yourself, it wasn't your fault. But I don't know. Young kiddie like that, whole life ahead of him. School trip tragedy, local man blamed. Every day the same. Parade of blank faces. The constant drip from the cavern roof. The cold indifference of the ancient rock. But you keep going, don't you? It's like the moss growing around that little light bulb there. Life finds a way. Look at that skein of iron oxide. You wouldn't find anything like that in Red Scar. Remember the guard on your way out?